Yep. All right. So we're recording again. All right. So if there've been no questions from the first part, we'll just quickly go over some of the aircraft danger areas. Again, you guys are all adults. However, it's been a while since you've been flying, I'm assuming. So we'll just go over some of this stuff just to help get rid of the cobwebs. Bo, this will be relatively new information for you. So as I said, just take as much as you can in, but this will all be part of your training in a few weeks' time. So danger areas. So can I just ask, can you guys see my laser pointer okay on the screen there?
Yep.
Beauty. All right, good stuff. Right. So when we talk about the disc, you might hear a pilot talk about when approaching the disc or under the disc or something similar. What he's talking about is the imaginary disc traced by the rotor blades as they are spinning. So the disc commences at the tips of the rotor blades. So if you are on the screen there, you can see the image of the helicopter, and underneath the disc is the orange circle on the ground. That is a caution area. We don't want to put our hands above our heads or carry anything above our heads. Just be aware that that disc can actually move. It's not only is it spinning, it can tilt forward, backwards, left, and right. And if the ground is uneven, the clearance between you and the disc will become uh, will be diminished, and so that clearance will decrease as well. So be aware of the disc and be aware of the ground on which you are walking. Sorry, going back. So the main rotor disc is the key area there. The most dangerous area of most helicopters is the tail rotor. And you can see on the screen there, the red area, which is the danger area. And that's because the tail rotor is normally at chest or head height. And the tail rotor spins faster than the main rotor. The other thing is that the pilot, if he or she is sitting in the cockpit, cannot see the tail rotor, so does not know what's going on back there, and that's why it's incredibly important that you, as members of the aviation team, can be trusted by the pilot that you're not going to do anything stupid, that you're not going to go anywhere around the aircraft whilst it's operating that is dangerous, and that you have enough awareness of the dangerous areas of the aircraft that you can ensure safety of people who are not aware of those dangers. So one key thing out of all this is when you are approaching or departing an aircraft, always do it within the view, the point of within the field of view of the pilot. So that's why we always approach between the 10 o'clock and the 2 o'clock, because that's the field of view of the pilot. But before we talk about approaching and departing, let's just go on to the next slide. So as you can see here, here is a helicopter. And you can see the front blade there is near some rising ground. And so the clearance between the ground and the blade is decreased. But as I said to you before, you can see there the blade is drooping. That rotor disc can actually tilt, or if the aircraft's rotor blades are starting up or slowing down, then the blades will droop. And so that clearance actually decreases even further. So be aware of the blades, be aware of any rising ground or uneven ground around the helicopter. There's another picture that demonstrates exactly the same thing. So approaching and departing the aircraft, we always try and make it between 10 and 2. You can come into the 12 o'clock position, but it's better to come in obliquely from the 10 o'clock or the 2 o'clock. And as you can see there on the screen, the green areas there are happy areas because the pilot's able to see you. If he turns his head, he can see you. But as soon as you go past, say, the where the engines are, he can't see you. And that's why it's a danger area. So approach and depart from the aircraft from the 10 o'clock and 2 o'clock. Approach and depart as a group. So when you are getting off the aircraft, mill around next to the nose of the aircraft. If you can touch the nose of the aircraft, you are safe. Pilot, and it's a good place to be because the pilot can see you. So the mission commander assisting the observers to get out of the aircraft. Observers wait near the nose of the aircraft. Mission commander closes the doors, grabs any equipment, any paperwork, and then as a group, you get the clearance from the pilot to depart and then walk away from the aircraft as a group. So when you are cleared to approach or depart the aircraft, you do so briskly. So what's the signal to approach the aircraft? How do you ask for permission to approach the aircraft? Cindy, do you remember?
It's eye contact with the pilot, and he'll say, "Come in" or "Stop." There'll be a hand
Not
movement as well.
not quite.
Not quite.
Anyone else? Dan, do you remember?
Thumbs up.
Thumbs up, yeah. So it's when you stay away from the aircraft, but you're within view of the aircraft, the field of view of the aircraft. Oh, sorry, field of view of the pilot. You put a thumbs up. Make sure if you're wearing a green glove, don't put a thumbs up in front of your chest if you're wearing a green flying suit. Put it outside. Can you see? Here you go. There we go. Do it like that so the pilot can see that you're asking for a permission to approach, and the pilot will either look at you and give you a thumbs up in return, or if he's got his hands occupied, will give you a nod of the head. You got to get a positive approval to approach the aircraft, either a thumbs up or a positive nod of the head. And then you make sure you're walking, approaching as a group. Remember, there's a lot of noise going on and you're wearing a helmet, so you can't hear anything. So the team leader, the mission commander, has to make sure that control is kept of the group, and you approach as a group. And you approach between the 10 o'clock and the 2 o'clock, head towards the nose of the aircraft. Once you're able to touch the nose of the aircraft, you're safe, so you can start moving around to the relative doors of the aircraft. Move briskly, so don't dawdle, but at the same time, don't run. And keep your eyes on the path, especially if you're out in an area where the ground is uneven. You don't want to put your foot into a hole because you're too busy concentrating on the aircraft. If you are carrying any objects, keep them below waist level. For the most part, you guys should not be carrying anything that's long. Sometimes survey crews will have big antennas and things. So those sort of things, if they're held above the shoulder, can actually impact the blades. But you guys are going to just have cameras, bags, and PEDs, etc. So that shouldn't be a drama. Once you're at the aircraft, stay close to the aircraft. Near the nose is good. Normally, it's a mission commander or the team leader will guide the observers into the doors and into their seats and assist them if necessary to say, do up the harnesses. Stand between yourself and the danger area, which the danger area being the tail rotor. Check the intercom and the harnesses, and the last person aboard checks the doors, has a look around, make sure there's no loose dogs running towards the aircraft or kids all very excited running towards the aircraft. Have a look around. You're also looking for any obstacles too. So this is what I'm talking about here is if you're departing from an area that's out in the field, say, maybe you just stop for a refuel, just have a look around, make sure there's no hazards that haven't already been identified. And then once you're on board, then you brief the pilot if necessary. What I'll ask you to do, guys, because you have the IPAS training resources page up, can I get you to go to the video that you can see on the screen there? It's called Mission Crew Course Mudgee, Role of the Mission Commander, and just watch that, and then we'll come back. So I won't play it. You guys can watch it on a separate screen or separate screen. That'll make it faster. So I'll see you back here in a couple of minutes after you finish watching that video.
Yeah, got you. You got me, mate.
Beautiful. No worries. So everyone's just watched the video, the one that's on the screen there. It's in the training resources page. Um, I'll let you watch that a bit later on, but we're just going to talk about the role of the mission commander there. As you can see, the mission commander was helping the observers get on board the aircraft. And because the aircraft can be a bit cramped, sometimes it's handy to have someone outside the aircraft that can reach in and assist, maybe to secure a bag or to help with putting on a harness or untangling an intercom lead. So the mission commander helps the air observers get on board and then gets on board himself or herself into the front seat. Now, that was a hot load and unload. For the most part, you guys are not going to have to do it hot, as in the engine's running and rotors turning. It'll be a cold. But in the event that you do it, it's always good to have someone outside the aircraft to reach in to assist, because it's always very cramped inside the aircraft when you're sitting down. Could you see how the mission commander there, because it was a hot load, was standing and guiding people into the seat, so that if you place yourself between the cabin and the tail rotor, that means someone has to walk around you to go to the danger area. That's why we try and get you, as the mission commander, to stand in a position such that for people to go to the danger area, they've got to get around you. So that's one of the things that we sort of teach as part of the working safety around aircraft. Bo, you'll see that when you're doing your practical training in a couple of weeks' time. Um, Once the mission commander is happy that the observers are squared away, they've got all their equipment within arm's reach, that the harness is secure, that the intercoms are on, everyone's done a sound check, etc. The mission commander jumps on board and then briefs the pilot. And you can see there the mission commander had the map, etc., is briefing the pilot. Now, would that apply to you guys? I would suggest probably not, but I'll open up the floor to any commentary. I think a lot of your briefings would be done even way before you get anywhere near the aircraft.
Yeah, true. Yeah, we would be doing all getting into the aircraft with the engine off,
Yeah.
and then we're strapping in and checking comms, and then we do a startup. So we're doing it all together. We
Yep.
do certainly do our briefings. Obviously the safety briefing initially on day one for the crew would be at the helicopter, but yeah, it's not a hot start, so to speak.
Sure. Yeah, and that's part of the working safety around aircraft. We make it a worst case scenario, but yes, for your operations, you would actually have everything squared away before you get anywhere near the aircraft, and then you strap in, and then start the engines. So that's good. That's what I expected. All
I
right.
got one thing.
Yeah, go ahead.
Just yeah, if you are the mission commander OIC, just make sure, guys, you're not under pressure to go fast. Okay, take your time, get everyone else set. Doesn't mean you're slowing the helicopter up. You've had an extra job to do. So when you do hop in the front, take your time. You're not under pressure. So don't think you have to rush to get in and quickly grab your seatbelts over and do something wrong, and just take your time, go slow.
Very
There are
good.
occasions
I
when,
was just going to say, Shane. Oh, go Dan.
oh, sorry, I was just going to say there are occasions when I might get out to reset the GoPro or something like that with the rotor on and engine on. But yeah, no, that's a good point, and it is really important to know how to approach it when it's a hot start and how to get people in and out.
Yeah.
Don't ever feel under pressure that you're the one holding up the helicopter. You're not. You have a couple of jobs to do. You're the last in. Take your time, and then you don't stuff things up.
Josh, you were going to say something?
I was going to say, yeah, not just for the OIC, but for the crew as well too. Like as you said, it's not a rush. Take your time as well. Don't need to get in there and get out. Take it. Yeah, the whole team slows down. It's a bit safer.
Yeah, and moving as a group after you've been given the okay.
Yeah, you might actually disembark the aircraft whilst the aircraft is still turning and burning, because maybe the pilot might need to reposition it after he drops you off. So that's why it's important. Now, when you've been operating with the aircraft for a while, you'll become much more relaxed around it. And so this won't be as big a stress. But Josh, you brought up a good point there. Same with you, Shane. We're talking about the feeling of being rushed. Time is usually the biggest stressor to people, regardless of what they are doing. You could be working in an office doing jobs, administrative jobs, or you could be working with aircraft. The idea that there is not enough time to do all the tasks within the time allotted is incredible stress, and it's one of the biggest stresses and the reasons why we make mistakes. And we'll be talking about that later on. So thank you, Shane, for reinforcing that time is not your enemy, that you can use as much time as necessary to do things safely and correctly. Better to be late than dead on time, as they say. Okay. Right, that's good. So preparing for flight. So we all know that we are members of the crew. Now, I conduct mission crew courses. I started doing those a number of years ago, but in the interim, CASA has actually started changing the terminology of what constitutes a member of the crew, what I call mission crew. I will continue to use the idea of mission crew because you are critical for the mission's success, therefore you are mission crew. But they used to call it supernumerary crew. Then it went on to task specialist. Now it's called airwork passenger. Regardless of what the title is, the critical thing to remember is that you are considered to be members of the crew for that mission. But you are not air crew, and don't ever call yourself air crew because that has a legal connotation. So if something goes wrong, then if you claim to be air crew, then the coroner is going to say, well, you say you're air crew, so how come you didn't do this? You are mission crew, and in accordance with the regulations now, you are actually classed as an airwork passenger, someone who is required to be on board the aircraft for the conduct of that airwork passenger. That's the new term, but I say mission crew. So if you hear me say mission crew, that's what I mean. So if you're allocated a duty on board the aircraft, you are technically a member of the crew, airwork passenger. So any person directly involved with operating the aircraft is flight crew. Any person directly involved with operating aircraft-specific equipment, such as winches, hoists, searchlights, electro-optical equipment, anything like that, they are aircrew. And anyone who is performing a role on board the aircraft for the mission, supernumerary crew, or what I say is mission crew. All right. So here's an example. So there's yours truly there. I was the pilot, so I was the aircraft commander. This guy here, he was in charge of the mission. He was the mission commander. And this guy in the back there, he was the observer. So what we were doing is power line survey. So anything to do with the aircraft and the safe operation of the aircraft, I was completely responsible for. But when it came to actually organizing the mission, this guy here would be doing the administration, contacting the electrical companies, making sure the lines that we were working were de-energized, which lines had the priority. He'd organize the accommodation, etc. But we would work together to make sure we could get the job done. So, for example, say we had a really, really strong northerly wind and we needed to patrol a line that was a north-south line. Well, it's better to do that into wind, so the nose is into wind. You don't want to have a tailwind. And so he might say, we need to do this particular line. We're up here at the north, so we'll head southwards for the day. And I would say, well, actually, it would be better if we go south first and then come back along the line, heading north as we're doing the inspection, because it's better for the aircraft and it's safer. He goes, yep, that's fine. Let's do it that way. So together, we would come up with a plan to get the mission done. And that's why it's very important before you actually get anywhere near the aircraft, you do your briefings for the day to see the best way to get the job done.
We do a little bit of that in the air too. So we might be approaching a complex where the flight path has been pre-prepared. And then we think, oh, actually, maybe it'd be more logical if we took a different approach on this network. And so we might just change it up in the air and discuss that. And then, yeah.
Yeah, that's operational decision making. That's exactly what you need to do to make sure that the job is done efficiently.
We're thinking, well, what's after this network? We've got to go west. So, yeah, might be better to start down there, work our way back up and then out.
Yeah, yeah. One of the other considerations I would have is where's my fuel? So I'd always try and go as far as I could when I had the most amount of fuel and then work backwards towards my fuel so that if things got pretty tight towards the end, I could actually say, stop the inspection because that's using a lot more fuel and go best range speed back to my fuel because I don't want to run out of fuel before I get anywhere near my refueler. So all those are
Yeah, that
operational
happens a
decisions.
lot too. So you can have a rough fuel cycle plan, but you'll be en route to the next sort of cluster of trails, and it's like, actually, we better go to Mudgee and do the fuel first,
Yeah, yeah.
rather than stick to our original plan.
Great. Look, Dan is interjecting there with some really good tips. Please, anyone else, if you have stuff that you have learnt and you thought that was an important thing to know, this is the best opportunity for you to chime in. Dan, I know how experienced you are. I really appreciate you putting in that extra information. Please keep on doing exactly that. Okay, right. Continuing on. All right, I won't worry about this next couple of things. Oops. Oh, yes, I will actually talk about this. So, because you guys are operating aircraft that are contracted to you, the interesting thing here is that you are in charge of the mission. So you're non-air crew, but you are in charge of the mission. That's why I talk about mission command versus aircraft command. The other interesting thing about your style of operations is that you may not necessarily be overly familiar with aviation, but you are expected to be able to run an aviation mission. And that's why we do this training, to get you comfortable with the concept so that you are comfortable with making those sort of decisions. And Dan pointed out a good one there about coming up to a cluster of fire trails. You may not be able to do them all on the bag of gas that you currently have. So go and refuel and then come back to do them. That way you can do them all in one go. So those are the sort of decisions that may not necessarily come to an ordinary passenger, but you as the coordinator of the mission and the mission command would have to be considering. The other thing about your operations, like we know now, is that you guys do your missions as a campaign, usually in the spring. And so you could go for 9 or 10 months without actually ever flying an aircraft, or you may even miss out on a year altogether. So you might go for a year or two without actually stepping foot in an aircraft. And that's not unusual. DPI has the same problem. Local Land Services has the same problem. I try and train them about once every 3 years. And sometimes the only time they get into an aircraft is when they come and do my training. Or maybe they've only flown once in the last 6 years outside of the training. And that can actually be quite dangerous because even though technically you are qualified, you may not have the recency to reinforce the skills that you need. So this is one of the reasons why it's important for you to speak up and say, yes, I am qualified. Yes, I have been trained, but I haven't done this for 12 months. So I just need a bit more extra supervision, or, I want to be retrained or something similar. That's when you go to Shane or Scott or George and say, hey, this is what I'm concerned about. The fourth dot point there, the aircraft and the aircrew may be short-term contractors. Well, heli surveys. You should be working in a squirrel helicopter, so you should be familiar with the style of aircraft. Although one squirrel performs differently to another, an earlier model squirrel may not have the same power as the later model squirrels. From memory, you guys need BA squirrels as B3 squirrels as a minimum, so they're quite powerful. But there could be a time where you might need to have a second sort of aircraft. So bearing that in mind, what sort of skills do you think that you would need or would come in handy if you need to overcome those sort of issues? What sort of interpersonal skills, what sort of aviation skills would be useful? Anyone? Bueller? No? How about assertiveness? Do you think assertiveness is a good skill to have? Oh, yeah. I'm not talking about aggression here, being assertive, because if you're going to be leading a team, assertiveness means that you are focused on the task, you're focused on getting it done, and you're focused on getting cooperation from other people within the team, but not doing so aggressively. Okay. You would also need to have a good knowledge of the mission's requirements and a good knowledge of how aircraft work and basic aerodynamics, the aircraft capabilities. And you'll soon find out the pilot's capabilities. You might have an inexperienced pilot who's technically got enough hours, but this is their first time they've done fire trial work. Or you might have someone like Cole, who's been operating and doing this stuff for years and years and years, and he knows how to do it standing on his head. So getting a bit of a knowledge of the requirements of the job and a knowledge of the aircraft and the capabilities of the aircraft and the people flying it, and the ability to manage all those resources. Now, from my understanding, and I haven't been a part of your campaigns, let me just make sure that this is still the way it's going, is that when you are flying around doing your inspections, your aerial inspections, that the campaign coordinator, whether it's Scott or whether it's Shane, will be coordinating the accommodation and everything else for the next stop. Is that right? So, okay, good. I'm getting a lot of nodding heads there. All right. So that's good. That helps to relieve some of the administrative burden. Fantastic. But there are things that you can do to assist that campaign coordinator.
Just on that assertiveness, it's really important. Every crew member is responsible for the safety of the operations, and it's really important to speak up if you see something. Or yeah, so it's having that confidence to pipe up.
Yep, 100%. And in fact, it's expected.
Yeah, just if you're a data operator, in this case, Bo's going to come into my crew as a data operator. You'll still, when we're in transit, you'll still be looking out the window a lot. And if you see something, a hazard, just because you're a data operator doesn't mean that you can't say anything. So it's really important. We've got 4 sets of eyes in the helicopter, which is better than 1. So
Dan,
I completely agree.
Yeah,
I'll give you a really good analogy. The one I always use and we always used to use was everyone's watched Pirates of the Caribbean. And if you watch Pirates of the Caribbean, his father's on the ship. I think it's the Dutch one, whatever it was called. And they always used to say part of the crew, part of the ship, part of the crew, part of the ship. So even if you're just a lookout at night, you might think that you could be the lowest sailor. If you're not part of the crew and part of the ship and watching out for the waves and the reefs and everything like that, the ship is going to come in and it's not going to go out. So just remember that analogy. Pirates of the Caribbean, part of the crew, part of the ship. If you're the only one looking out the window, you've got to speak up. But then if everyone has a lookout, there's 4 people looking. That's the best way to do it.
The common scenario is when we're coming into controlled airspace or we're approaching an aerodrome or departing, and we're hearing other traffic on the radio, and the pilot may take a moment or 2 to try and get a visual on that aircraft, and he may know where it's situated approximately in the circuit or around that aerodrome. It's really important that if you see that, just to give that position of that aircraft really helps. You just speak up. You say, yep, I've got him at, you just try and give an approximate location. Really helps the pilot then, is that situation awareness.
Yeah, excellent.
100% agree, Dan. We were flying in our Bankstown last year. That's where we were. And yeah, that was a busy little airport, but yeah, the pilot's trying to look out and listen to everything. Yeah. So if I'll sit in the back, if you can hear on the radio, on the headset too, you can look down and say, oh, that's him down there or something rather, and you just help the pilot out. He's like, oh, sweet, know where he is now. I can taxi across or go across here or whatnot. And yeah, especially, it was pretty busy, but it was a good experience to get through that sort of stuff and just, I just had been an extra set of eyes for him.
Yeah, and
yeah, I actually did my training at Bankstown when I was a young trainee before I joined the military. And at that time, it was the 4th busiest airport in the world in terms of takeoffs and landings. So it is a very, very busy general aviation airport.
You get 2 parallel runways, helicopters.
Yeah, the helicopter will be starting at Bankstown again this year. So there's 3 days of flying out of Bankstown. So it's going to, there's a point of departure, point of approach, and tower controls everyone coming in and out. I think the first flight out of there last year was about 7 to 8 minutes on the departure point. waiting for everything, all clearance.
Try waiting for 35 minutes for a
Okay.
departure and then having to go back and refuel because you're waiting for aircraft to come in and land. As up in Townsville. All right, let's continue on. Thank you very much for that. Those really good inputs there. So keep them coming. So what can you do as a member of the aviation team to assist in getting the mission done and assist the pilot? Well, first of all, make sure you wear and use the proper equipment that you've been issued with. Provide accurate information to the aircrew. So before you get near the aircraft, hopefully you're sitting down and you're doing your morning brief and you're going over which trails that you're expecting to be able to fly over and inspect during the course of that day. Make sure you know your job. Make sure you know how to do your job. One of the other big stressors within the organizations is if people don't do their job, then you need to go in and help them do their job. It just wastes time. So know your job, know how to do it, and understand the jobs of others in the team. We'll be doing the no stopping for teamwork module later on, and that we'll explain that a bit more in depth. And make sure you assist to maintain safety. And as Dan and Josh pointed out there, that you are an extra set of eyes, especially for traffic when you're taxiing in the airport complex and when you are approaching or departing a busy airport in particular. And also because you're flying down low, wildlife, so birds, etc., and other obstacles can be an issue. And as Shane said, as Captain Jack Sparrow, part of the crew, part of the ship. Some team checks. So what you do before you jump on board the aircraft, make sure that everyone is ready to go. Make sure your helmets are done up, that the chin straps are done up. Make sure that your helmets are serviceable, that the visors are clean, that you're wearing all the appropriate PPE, flying suit, gloves, boots, etc., and that all your equipment is ready and has been checked, and spare batteries if necessary, so that you don't have to readjust the equipment in flight. Check that the program is up to date, and that you can input information. Josh, I did notice that when you were just talking, you had a lot of plosives into your mic. Are you able to move your mic just a little bit away from? There you go, like that. Now, that's good for what we're doing, but when you are on board the aircraft, you want the microphone right up against your lips. It's a little bit different. If you put it up against your lips, the way the microphone is designed, it actually takes in sound from outside the microphone, and then it uses as like a reverse sine wave so that it actually cancels out a lot of the noise. But if you have your microphone away from your lips, it takes in sound from both sides of the microphone, which is a real pain. So what you want is that microphone touching your lips. Flight suits checked, make sure all the zippers are done up, any foreign objects and debris is secured, and your footwear, gloves, and attached gear is all secured, and that your equipment has been checked.
Just on that very quickly.
Yeah, go ahead.
Take the time they're not custom helmets, so everyone's going to have a slightly different fit. Take the time to get the padding, which comes with the kit, to customize how it fits on your head. If it's too uncomfortable or tight in places, you'll definitely get a headache. It's really uncomfortable, especially if we're doing 6 hours. So the other thing is be responsible for your equipment. Okay, make sure that it's working before we get in the helicopter. Make sure you've loaded your maps, everything's working. You're ready to go with charge on your iPads. Make sure you've got your charger there set up. So obviously we want to be getting good data and good functionality in the air because it's expensive. So if your iPad's not working, it's a very expensive mistake. Yeah.
100%.
Yeah, with the helmet fitting, last year I posted a really good video on how the padding works and how to set your helmet up properly. I'll see if I can find it and send it to Shane again.
Yeah, I've got it in the list, mate. She'll go out in the email to everyone probably next week.
Yep.
Yeah.
Both very good points. Yes, you're 100% right there, Dan. A hot spot in a helmet there will give you a headache very, very quickly and makes the whole mission very unenjoyable.
Especially if it's in the forehead.
Yeah. So when we're briefing aircrew, so you guys will know which trials you want to do. Make sure that you give the aircrew as much information as possible. Make sure you give the aircrew all accurate passenger and equipment weight. Now, because there's only Usually 3 people on board on a squirrel. That's usually not a problem for it, but you sometimes might have an extra observer like RFS to a bit of a ride along. Make sure that all the information that you provide to the pilot is accurate. He doesn't care if you've got carrying an extra couple of kilos after Christmas break. What he does care about, or she cares about, is making sure that the calculations are done correctly for the performance calculations prior to going flying. Manifest should be done, and that's part of your reporting back to the campaign coordinator. We'll talk about that as part of the risk management pro forma. Here's an example of one of the exercises that you do as part of my mission crew course there. So all of you would probably remember this from when you did it with me and Bo. This is what you'll be doing when you do it with me in a couple of weeks. I'll be providing you with sat pics, satellite pictures, and you're going out looking for particular items on the ground. We'll try and integrate a fire trail for you if we can, but we may not be able to. We'll see what we can do. I'll speak to Shane and Scott about that. But if you have a look on the screen there, you can see the picture of a dam next to a road. And you notice how I've got the waypoint mark there, which is, what do you think that is, Bo?
Well, I'm just looking around the mark itself. There seems to be a power line there.
100% right. That's a power pole. So that was the waypoint. I bring that up only because notice how you can't see the actual power pole itself except for that little bit of grey pixels, but you can tell by the shadow. So part of what we're doing as low flying is looking for clues about what's going on in the ground around us and obstacles.
That was a chocolate. If he said the shadow, he would have got a chocolate, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yes. So yes, if you see a power pole structure, you know there's going to be conductors, the wires nearby. So you can only just make out the wires along here. You can't see them along here, but you don't expect to see the wires. So you're looking for other clues. So I only bring that up. Sorry, did someone say something? No? Okay, so I only bring that up because this is the time when we're going to get the expertise from other people that have done the job, and both Dan's and Josh have been chiming in there with some of their experiences. This is a perfect time for people to start talking about their own experiences. But going back to the idea of providing accurate information, you're showing the pilot as much information as possible so he or she can actually start thinking ahead, getting that situational awareness. What do I need to do? I've got 2.5 hours worth of fuel. Looking at that, I reckon that's at least 3 hours. So we're going to have a fuel break in between. When's the best time to do it? Well, I can actually get my refueler to be here, or there's fuel at this airport over there. If you give as much information as possible to the pilot before the engines start, a lot of planning happens way ahead of time, usually in the pilot's head. And that's when that stuff can be sorted out and make the mission run much more efficiently.
One really helpful thing to the pilot, so he can be properly situated for the start of the run at the trail, is instead of overflying his waypoint and then circling back and again, okay, there's the trail start. If you're the observer or the officer in command, can look at the air photo and you can see the trail where it starts and where the direction it runs, and it might be obvious telltales on an air photo. So it might be in the corner of a clearing, like a paddock. So you're overflying bushland, and the start of the trail is at the corner of a paddock, right, with the fence running north, south, east, west. You're able to say to the pilot from a few miles out, because you can see it at 12 o'clock or 11 o'clock, you say the trail is in the corner of that, the southeast corner of that clearing at 11 o'clock. And he goes, aha, yeah, that's the gate, and the trail runs northeast. So he'll be able to then, instead of fly directly at it, he'll situate himself to be able to come down and around and make that run. Just saves a bit of time, and it gives that situation awareness to the pilot, because he doesn't have that aerial imagery with the fire trail on his screen. So he's basically just got a flight path with a pink line or the fire trail. So that's really helpful.
Yeah, that's a very good point there. I didn't realize that sort of stuff was necessary for you guys, because we do that all the time in the military. So what you're describing there is, if the pilot is tracking towards a specific point, we would say, track towards that point, intercept the point on such and such a heading at such and such a speed, and the pilot will then go, okay, I need to change my track now so that I'm flying over that waypoint at this particular heading, which basically negates what you just described there, Dan. They don't have to circle around. Yeah.
Yeah, that's another level of skill to be able to do that. That for us, a basic visual reference. And another good example is the trail. Sometimes it starts down in the bottom of a ravine or a gully, and we're flying towards a ridge. He can't see the topo on his map. From memory, they don't have that. So we can say, well, the trail is on the other side of that ridge. We've got to go over that ridge that you can see, and then we go down into the valley. And it starts at the creek line in the bottom of that valley. So he knows he's got to it's not on the ridge, it's over the ridge. So things like that are really helpful to the pilot.
Yeah,
and that's
excellent.
Something the observer can do, because you've got your Incendo map open. You can see the air photo, you can see the terrain relative to, or the trail relative to terrain.
Yeah, that's really, really good hints there, Dan. Thank you very much for that. And that's good for me too, because when I do future training, I'll integrate that into the training so that it's not a surprise. You don't learn it on the job, you actually learn it in training. That's really good.
We actually did some of that, Dan, when we're doing some of the stuff. There was stuff at the bottom of a ravine sort of thing. So we'll just on the fly say, righto, we'll start at the top so we can see, and then sort of make our way down through there. So just got to obviously assess what's going on as well too.
Yeah, and you're right there, Dan. They do their charts are superimposed aeronautical charts. We'll have a look at those in a minute. And you guys have got topo charts, so you've got a lot more vertical relief information, whereas the aeronautical charts do not have that level of detail.
I think the pilots too, Dan, they had maps of transmission lines and that sort of stuff too. They had overlaid that they can see, so you can see a bit of an idea of where they are. So a bit of an idea when they're approaching, they could see roughly, get a bit of an idea.
You can see then that there's all these sources of information that we have. You're looking at an air photo. He's got his hazards layer. He's got his flight path. You've got topo. So you're piecing that information together and talking about it.
Yep, good stuff. Yeah, we'll have a look at some of the charts. We'll also look at some other resources for power lines. So be prepared for your mission, give good briefings and directions. And also, if you are giving a briefing, make sure that you're doing it somewhere that is not where there's not too many distractions, or it's too hot or too cold, too noisy, or there are time pressures. Make sure you give yourself plenty of time. So what you want to do is you want to maximize the ability of people to take in information. You don't want their brains to be processing other stuff or have that stressor about time. So give good briefings away from distractions, and be in a fit state to do your job. Even having a cold is not being in a fit state to do your job, because you're under the weather. You're not operating at your optimum. And here's another big one. If in doubt, ask. Like I say, no such thing as a stupid question, just stupid mistakes. SMEX brief. So I have been pushing this for the last few years. Do you guys actually use them in real life, IRL? So Dan and Josh, anyone?
Not really, and it's something that bothers me a bit. I'll give you an example. So, the pilot's obviously getting his NOTAMs, he's getting his forecast, he's doing things on his own, and we go out to the aircraft. We might just have a very brief discussion about where we're going, but there's a lot of information that probably is not communicated. I don't want to sound critical, but it would be nice to know, what we can expect over the day in terms of weather, any particular constraints, or,
I'd say to that, Dan, that since a couple of years that you haven't flown, there's folders sitting on each seat for each role. And for the OIC sitting in the front, you now have a checklist every morning of what
Yeah.
you need to do. And a breakfast briefing is part of it. And at the end of the 3 days or the 4 days that we fly, there is now a handover checklist that each role will pass to the next person coming in. It's got to be done. It's mandatory.
Yeah, I was just going to
Yeah, that's
say,
excellent. Right. Because I did, talk about it there for a while, and I'm really pleased to hear that. That's
I
excellent.
was just going to say my experience with that has been different. Like in the morning briefing, we discuss weather and anything that might come up.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. So just
So,
in the last couple
Conley,
of years, mate, improvements have been made.
I have been away for 2 years. I've been in national parks. So, yeah, that's great
Okay.
to hear.
Yeah, okay, that's great. Shane, I might talk to you offline if I could get some copies of those to see what you guys are using. I can integrate that into the training.
Yep,
Okay.
will do.
Okay, beautiful. Thank you. So just so you understand, the SMEAX is an acronym standing for Situation, Mission, Execution, Administration and Logistics, and Command and Signals and Safety. So on the screen there is one that I've created. It's a military format. It's actually created by the Americans, and I've updated it to be able to be used by a pilot to give a brief to a team, or a mission commander or OIC to give a brief to the team. And it should cover every single item that they need to know for that operation, for that mission. Or it can also be used as a planning tool. So when you're going through and looking for where's fuel going to be, where's our accommodation going to be, it's a checklist as well. So it's both a planning tool as well as a briefing tool. I'm running a little bit behind schedule. I really want to get some other stuff done. But this is actually quite important. Shane, if you say that there is procedures in place that look after the briefing format, I'm happy to continue, or do you want me to actually talk about this in more depth?
It's fine. We've got another meeting with each role next Thursday for an hour in each role. So each of the 3 roles will have an hour's meeting next Thursday.
Okay.
And we'll be going over all these forms and everything on that week. So
beautiful.
It's just another refresher for the 6 or 7 OICs can all get together and pop ideas around. I'll put the forms up, make sure everyone's comfortable with them this year. And
no worries.
So, yeah, I'll get all that then.
Okay. Well, if you can send that to me, that's great. Okay.
Yep.
All right. Well, in that case, that being the case, I will continue on. We'll get to the low flying stuff. Now this is where I normally give a scenario, and I think I may have done it before. I'm wondering whether or not it's useful. No, I won't bother because we're running a bit late. No, if we've got time, I'll come back to this. So what I do is I give an example of giving a SMEAX brief as if I was the OIC or mission commander for a fire trail inspection using this briefing methodology. I will come back to it later if we have the time, but because you guys have got a meeting next week, I might actually be teaching you to suck eggs after next week. But I will finalize this first part of the training with just saying that you are not a passenger, even though CASA says you are an airwork passenger. You are a member of the crew as far as I'm concerned, so you need to be part of the ship, part of the crew. Don't be passive. Make sure you keep your head moving and you are looking out for any potential dangers, particularly in those busy flight regimes or coming into or departing a busy airfield environment and at low level. Tell the pilot, no matter how small, even if you think he or she already knows about the problem, they will appreciate it and they will know that they can trust you to be able to speak up if something's going on and they don't know about it. Okay. All right, does anyone have any final questions or points before we go on to the next stuff about low flying? No? Okay. All right. How are we going for time? All right, we'll just crack on for about another 5 minutes and we'll have a 5-minute break. Right, now, this is your bread and butter when it comes to fire trails. And apart from other organizations, your nature of operations, your your domain is actually quite low compared to other organizations. This is why it's very, very important to understand low flying. So what we try and do is we try and stay in the middle of the air. We do not want to go near the edges of the air. The air is, and the edges are marked by ground trees or space. So try and stay in the middle of the air. Low flying is a specific flight regime, and there are another number of organizations that engage in it. There is a list of them on the screen. And of course, you guys are part of survey as and agricultural. So you would be both agricultural and survey if you wanted to sort of drill right down into it. So what is low flying? Well, the International Civil Aviation Organization, which is a United Nations agency that oversees worldwide civil aviation, they actually stipulate what low flying is in their rules of the air. And Australia is a signatory state to the Chicago Convention on Aviation, which means that we will try and make our rules as close as possible, if not the same, as the international standard, which is the ICAO rules. And the other nations around the world that are signatories to that convention do the same. So on the screen, we have copies of the different regulations. So here we have the United Nations Convention on Civil Aviation, ICAO rules. Australia, we have Civil Aviation Safety Regulations, CASRs. Civil Aviation Rules in New Zealand. In the UK, we have the basic regulations, and in Canada, we have the Canadian aviation regulations. And in America, we have the federal aviation regulations. If you do a comparison of the wording on all their rules on low flying, they're almost exactly the same across the board with some minor differences. So I could be an American pilot, come to fly in Australia, and the low flying rules are almost exactly the same as back in the United States. More or less. So based on the talk we had this morning about the regulatory rules, where do you think you would find the rules on low flying in civil aviation safety regs? Which level of documentation do you think they would be?
They'd be tier 1, would they?
No, tier 1 is written by politicians. So think Canberra, thou shalt make CASA, thou shalt fly airplanes safely in Australia.
Tier 2, the standards.
Yes, exactly right. So it'll be in the regulations, so CASRs, and then in the manual of standards. So it'll be tier 3. So the CASRs will tell you, yes, you must fly in accordance with the rules, and the rules state you can not fly lower than this sort of particular altitude, which we'll talk about next. And the manual of standards will expand upon that and explain the intricacies of that. So where we go. Oh, why is that not moving? All right. So up here on the yellow band, it's got these specific regulations and the manual of standards where you find that information. Oops, let me just get rid of my little annotations. There we go. Right. So here we have low flying. So lowest altitude permissible that is not classed as low flying. So this is just normal day-to-day flying. If you are above 1,000 feet above the highest obstacle over populous areas, then you are not low flying. But if you are below 1,000 feet, then you are low flying. So what is 1,000 feet above the highest obstacle over populous areas? What does that mean? Well, populous areas, they used to say cities and towns, but there are other areas that can be populated, such as country show days, regattas, sporting events, etc. That's populous areas because people are gathered together. So that's what they mean by populous area. And 1,000 feet above the highest obstacle. So let's say you are at the Birdsville race days. Okay, Birdsville is not where the racetrack is not a populous area normally, but when you have a lot of people there, it is. And so they had a big crane that was, say, 100 foot tall with a camera to film it. Then you need to be 1,100 feet above ground level, which is 1,000 feet above the crane. That's what they mean. So there has to be 1,000 feet of clear air between the aircraft and any obstacle below you. That's in a populous area. Now, when you guys are going out doing your fire trails, are you flying over populous areas? Are fire trails in a populous area?
Yeah, sometimes we might have to approach over a town.
That's doing the approach.
Yeah.
But are the fire trails in a populous area?
Some of them are, yeah.
Yeah, some of the coastal ones are.
Yeah.
So the fire trails are going over places where people gathered or they live?
Yeah, you might have a reserve or something. You might have a reserve in the middle of a suburb.
Yep.
And there'll be fire trails within that the SPFOs maintain.
Sometimes,
And you have to go over the houses to actually inspect those trails in the reserve.
Yeah, okay, that's the approach. But the actual fire trails are not next to a populous area, though, are they?
you might be on the edge and then running away.
Yeah. All right. So this is where a lot of people don't understand how it works, including pilots. So I'm going to explain the logic behind it. And if you understand the logic, then you'll always remember it. So first of all, let's ask ourselves, what exactly does it mean when we say underneath the aircraft? Are we just talking about like a tube below the aircraft? What we're actually talking about is, if you can imagine a circle surrounding the aircraft like a hula hoop with a radius of 300 meters. So that circle around the aircraft, anything in that circle below that is now something we need to consider to be an obstacle. So 300 meters is your magic number. This is for a helicopter. For an aeroplane, it's 600, but you're not going to be doing inspections in aeroplanes for the most part. So if you're not over a populous area, as I described before, 99.9% of the time when you're doing fire trail inspections, you are going to be over other areas, in which case the minimum altitude is 500 feet. Now, when you do your inspections, you are going to be down at about 30, 40, 50 feet above the trees, correct? Yep. Okay. You are definitely low flying when you're doing your inspections. So that being the case, you now understand that if you're in a populous area, unlikely you're going to have a fire trail. You need to be above 1,000 feet. So if you're doing an approach towards a reserve, then you should be above 1,000 feet. And then once you're over the reserve, then you descend to your low flying regime. When you then leave the reserve, you fly up to 1,000 feet to transit over the houses. Does that make sense? Yeah, good. Right. Now the pilots should know that. Now, here's something that they sometimes get mixed up with. They'll say 1,000 feet AGL, which stands for above ground level. It's not. It's above the highest obstacle. So if the trees are 100 feet, or the houses say are like, a two-story house is 60 feet tall or whatever it might be, then you need to be 1,000 feet above the TV antenna on top of that house. It's not AGL. It's not above ground level. It's above the obstacle. Within 300 meters of the helicopter. So when can you fly low? Well, part 138, which is airwork, the manual of standards says when you're allowed to fly low. And as I just pointed out there, if you are positioning the aircraft, you must fly at the appropriate altitude above a populous area until you get to the location where the work is to commence. Then you descend to your low flying regime. The other stipulations they have is that if you are flying in areas other than populated areas, you should avoid flying within 150 meters of a person who's not associated with that work, or 150 meters of a building or a vessel or livestock. Okay. Now, if you've got people on the ground who know what you are doing and you're doing the inspection and they are expecting you to fly over, well, then they are associated with your work. So you can get close to them. But if it's just a member of the public, you're not supposed to be closer than 150 meters. Right? Is this making sense? Can you see the logic behind these rules? You don't want, say, for example, you don't want to be within 150 meters of some livestock. So you've got a champion racehorse. You don't want to be scaring that. So this is why they integrate these sort of numbers into the rules to try and avoid these situations where you are scaring people or scaring animals.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Good.
Questions?
I'd confidently say that we're doing that.
Yeah. Beautiful. Good.
Livestock, and we're avoiding houses.
Yep.
It's just on occasion with the approach to a trail that's running off a built environment, we do come in proximity at the start of that trail.
Yeah, and that's understandable. That's operational necessity. So you can't basically go straight over the top and then dive straight down. That's ridiculous. You can't do that.
They're generally, they are observing that minimum altitude.
Good. Right. So when we do our vertical distances as aviators, we reference it to mean sea level. So the picture on the screen there, if you can imagine that bottom line there is a sea level, then that dashed blue line is 500 feet AMSL, above mean sea level. But if we are talking about low flying, we are talking usually about flying over land, then we're talking about AGL and AHO. So here on the right-hand side, we have 500 feet above ground level. You can see the dashed black line there, and we have 500 feet above the level of the ground. Now over here, sorry, that should actually say AHO, 500 feet above the highest obstacle, then the highest obstacle is going to be the height of the trees. Right. So ground level and highest obstacle are actually different. I'll have to update that picture. That's incorrect. Now there are specific weather requirements for low flying, and we know that you guys need to have good weather to go flying so that you can take imagery. So you're not going to be flying in crappy weather for the most part. However, you may actually have to transit through some bad weather, or might be some light rain, etc. Because you are going to be down at low level and you're in a helicopter, you can actually legally fly when the visibility is 800 meters. So 8 football fields in front of you. If you can see 8 football fields in front of you, that is legal. But for the most part, you will be flying when your visibility is 5 kilometers or greater.
Is it Cav OK?
Cav OK is a little bit different. But yes, clearance and visibility is okay, because Cav OK indicates that you have a clearance of cloud to a certain altitude. Whereas here, this is what's called VMC, visual meteorological conditions. You can actually fly with your rotors in cloud, provided the cockpit is out of cloud, and that is still legal. But that's not Cav OK. Yeah. So Cav OK stands for clearance and visibility is okay. It means something different. Yeah. I won't go into too much detail there, because the pilot's going to say, well, the weather's crappy, you're not going to be able to see anything, so we're not going to go flying. So I'll leave that up to the pilot. But you should actually ask the pilot for what the conditions are. Anyway, I promised you a break, didn't I? And I've gone over that. How about we take a break? It's 11:06. You guys want, say, 15 minutes to grab yourselves a coffee? Okay, so how about we're back here at, say, 20 past 11, and then we'll do an hour and 10 minutes and we'll break for lunch. 20 past 11 and then break for lunch.
Thanks, Colin.
No worries. See you back.
Still on board?